The Tom London Show is brought to you by Suzuki Kyalami.
The Tom London Show.
Yeah, how's it?
Thank you very much.
Of all the days where I feel good plays, today's not my day. I've had severe sciatic pain for 2 months now, and I thought stretches could work it out, but it's taken a cocktail of cortisones and anti-inflammatory jabs at the doctor this morning to get me upright. But am I feeling good? Yeah, because we've got an amazing guest on for you this afternoon. And if you're watching the show live on YouTube, welcome to the Tom London Show. If you're watching on our Facebook platform, you're one of the dysfunctionals in the comments section. You know that I rely on your hellos and your inputs and your comments and questions throughout the show. Line them up, because today we dig into the big ideas shaping our world, and I'm thrilled to bring you an incredible guest, LeonLouw, the founder of the Freedom Foundation in South Africa. Now, Leon's story is wild. He started as an anti-apartheid activist, then he flipped the script to become a powerhouse for free market ideas. He co-founded the Free Market Foundation in 1975. He ran it for decades and made it one of the world's top think tanks. His work has helped shape post-apartheid South Africa with major contributions to the Constitutional Assembly on economic freedom and the rule of law. He's written amazing books like South Africa, The Solution, and Habits of Highly Effective Countries, and he's spoken everywhere from the US Congress to the United Nations, pushing for policies that lift people up. In 2022, he started the Freedom Foundation to keep fighting for free markets, limited government, and individual rights. LeonLouw, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
It's my honor to be on the show. Hi to you and the viewers and listeners and the world out there.
You're too kind, Leon. Thank you. You'll get to know the people that are going to comment as we go, and we'll dip into the comments just now. But I thought I would start by asking you just a very simple, basic question, and that is, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Oh, I was born in Krugersdorp and I grew up in Potchefstroom. My mother basically died soon after I was born, so I never knew her. I was brought up by an aunt and come from, let's call it a low-income family. And eventually I migrated to Johannesburg when my father remarried in my teens. And so my teen and adolescent years were in Johannesburg.
In the intro, I spoke about your pivotal moment towards free market thinking, but you've had more than one pivotal moment. Your first must have been when you became an anti-apartheid activist. How did that happen?
Yes, well, I grew up in a community, Potchefstroom, white Afrikaner community, where we were pro the family, the community was pro-apartheid. Verwoerd was regarded as some kind of god and hero. When he died, we as kids were all taken along to the funeral, and there were many tears, and so I grew up with that view. I have to say, in defense of the people concerned, my immediate family, for example, my father, they sincerely believed that apartheid was fair and just to all. They saw it as simply like Europe with nation states, France for the French, Italy for the Italians. They just wanted the same for South Africa. Basically United Nations. There was never any disrespect or rudeness or looking down upon people of any race. And so we were brought up to respect everybody as equals. And the idea was separate but equal. Then I went to Wits University, partly to learn to speak English correctly. And there I encountered the communist and radical left world and activism, and that appealed to me. All of a sudden I thought, no, this is better. And I started learning about what apartheid was really doing, which was terrible. And I'll never forget a seminal moment when I told my father about what was happening with resettlements and detentions and what have you. He said, ons mense sal nooit sulke dinge doen nie. Dis communiste propaganda. Our people will never do things like that.
Yeah.
You're just a victim of communist propaganda at Wits University. And I accepted that he was in complete good faith, complete goodwill towards all people, and certainly died before I think it became obvious to him that apartheid was the terrible atrocity that it was. So when at Wits University, I became converted to communism. Now, people think that's a big step. It's actually not really. Apartheid was communism for black people, for the majority of South Africans, with, according to the famous British economist Roy Harrod, the greatest accomplishment ever in the world of the abolition of class, total equality, total government ownership and control of all means of production, distribution of human resources. So for black people, apartheid was pure communism. And and there was the few whites, the 10% or so, who were exempt from it and lived in a kind of weird fascist mixed economy. And so at Wits, I then was told, well, no, to be equal, what you have to have is communism. And I used to say in these leftist radical intellectual discussions, why are we against apartheid? Apartheid is communism for black people. Why do we, is what we oppose what is being done to black people or what is being done to white people? I was just always a troublemaker because I asked the tough questions, of which those were some. And then I discovered liberalism and libertarianism and converted to that. And again, people thought there was some kind of big change. I said, no. In apartheid, I wanted the state to wither away into small nation states. Under communism, I wanted the state to wither away. People forget that Marx was for the withering away of the state. It just had to, lots of people had to be killed and oppressed first along the way. And then liberalism and libertarianism, which is a purer form of liberalism, said, well, just get rid of it immediately. You don't have to have any violence or oppression or whatever. So basically, I feel as if, although I've gone from apartheid to communism to libertarianism, I feel as if I've just always been in favor of personal freedom. That has always just been my paradigm, and those ideologies and philosophies appeared at the time to provide that. That the complexity of the journey, I was converted from communism to free market capitalism, libertarianism, and not by reading the fancy philosophers Hayek and Popper and von Mises and Rothbard and Milton Friedman and so on, Thomas Sowell is my favorite, but by seeing a little old lady on the side of the road on the corner of Bree and Risick Street being brutalized by the apartheid police in the late 60s when I was a young articled clerk. And I thought, but hold on a sec, is she a capitalist, a free market person? Am I meant to be against her with the apartheid police? I wasn't. I went and I fought for her, and she was actually killed. They banged her head so badly against the side of the police van that cracked her skull and she died. Granny Moyle was her name. And then I decided, well, hold on a sec, everyone should be free to trade, from street vendors all the way up to multinational conglomerates. Same equal freedom for all to engage in voluntary human action, what I call consenting acts, capitalist acts between consenting adults. And that converted me to being for free markets, for freedom of enterprise, for everybody, from the smallest to the biggest, and that's where I've stayed since.
What is the Freedom Foundation?
The Freedom Foundation is a policy, what's called a policy institute or a think tank. And what it does is it promotes the idea of freedom, including especially economic freedom. In other words, freedom to, for example, compete in the supply of broadcasting, what you are doing. Freedom to compete with business, trade, banking, everything from banking to backyard operators to service providers. So we promote freedom of enterprise, but also personal freedom. We want free speech. We want freedom of association. We just want the government to leave people alone. What people do by themselves, we advocate by submissions to the government on energy policy and health policy and education policy. We do submissions and go to Parliament and appear before portfolio committees, meet with ministers and DGs, run seminars and workshops, do publications, all of which advocate that the best thing for everybody, for personal freedom and prosperity for all, is for the economy to be maximally free, to have minimal government intervention. Now that ranges from, for example, freedom of smokers I'm a lifelong non-smoker myself, but freedom of smokers to smoke so long as they don't put their smoke in my face, you see. You're free to wave your fist around in the air so long as you don't wave it where my nose is. I mean, so I want the same for everybody. And that's really where we are. So personal freedom, minimal government intervention, and allow people to control their own lives rather than to have people being controlled.
I built this interview with the question, is South Africa broken? And we'll come back in just half a minute and talk about that. Also dip into the comments and say hello to the viewers. But there's a great deal happening at Suzuki Kyalami, and Jason Pullinger's got the details.
You looking to get behind the wheel of a Suzuki Swift? We've got just the deal for you. The Suzuki Swift 1.2 GL Plus manual offers wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, digital air conditioning, auto stop start, 6 airbags, ABS brakes, ESP, reverse camera, and rear park sensors. All this can be yours at 229,900. That's a whopping saving of 16,000 Rand. So what are you waiting for? Pop in at Suzuki Kyalami and Suzuki Rivonia, the home of happy customers.
Yeah, you go speak to the guys and girls at Suzuki Kyalami, get a great deal. The special runs at the moment. On the show today, our incredible guest, LeonLouw, the founder of the Freedom Foundation in South Africa, talking about his life and our country. But you're also an important part of the conversation, so let's take a look and see what you've got to say as you join us on the Tom London Show this Tuesday afternoon. Helen Mittbach says, hello, Tom and everyone. Heather Knickelbein says, good afternoon, Tom and the Dysfunctionals. Anita number 1 says, hello, my Dysfunctionals family. Hope you're well. Gail Mortensen says, how's it, Tom? Happy Tuesday vibrations. Welcome to LeonLouw. Margaret Guider says, hi, everybody. Rosie Brown has got her rose. Anita Mainhart, number 2, says, hello, Leon. Hello, everyone, says Una Guider. Hi, Leon. Wonderful to have your presence, says Margaret Guider. I've got a very welcoming audience, Leon. Marlene Falkenberg says, hi, everybody. Emily Hudson is on board. Welcome to LeonLouw, watching on my PC. Barbara Ann Glaus is on board. Beverly Lloyd joins us from the UK. Who else have we got here? Look at Thea Gates says, amazing car. Wendy Kutsia is on board, and so is Nikki Hart. More will join us. If you've got a question for LeonLouw or a comment you'd like to put in the comment section, put it in there, and I'll pass it on to Leon during the show. Leon, is South Africa broken?
No, I'm actually one of the few optimists around. It seems to me that almost everybody from the left to the right are pessimists about South Africa. They just blame the other side for everything that is supposedly wrong. And I make the observation that it's not binary, it's not good or bad, it's not broken or fixed, it's not prosperous or backward. It's a sort of messy, muddled path. And I would just cite for the good news, and I'm not one of these Pollyannas who searches for the good news, but if you just look at the objective facts, for example, if you go to Stats SA and you simply look at all the indices for the quality of life in South Africa, everything that measures the quality of life, life expectancy, access to clean water, access to housing, access to motorized transport, literacy rates, everything. There are about 100 measures that tell you about how good or bad things are, the quality of the air, the quality of electricity, etc. And by every measure, and I'll get to the one exception, which is unemployment in a moment, by every single measure, everything is getting better for almost everybody, almost everywhere, almost all the time. And so we have something to, I wouldn't say rejoice, but certainly the country is not broken, at least not yet.
Yeah.
And I am happy to see that the quality of life, especially of poor people, is improving and has been improving and is better than it has ever been. Not just here, by the way, but the whole world. People are pessimists, people are catastrophists, they're alarmists. The reality is Steven Pinker and Julian Simon and others like that point out that actually most things are getting better for most people in most places, most of the time, by most measures. I did mention labor, unemployment.
Yes.
That is the only statistic that shows things getting worse, one of the only ones, the only important one anyway. And that's not nearly as bad as people think. G.G. Alcock, for example, in Casinomics, points out that the number of people employed in the so-called unrecorded informal sector, as does Capitec, points out that all of the people that they're opening accounts for are all the people who are supposedly unemployed. And so what is happening is that unemployed really says people who are registered as job seekers. Now, what is happening is many people are registered, but that doesn't mean they don't have a job. They're actually working, they're in formal business, they're doing farming, they're doing manufacturing, they're doing artisan, volunteer work. Many of the people you bump into every day and you stand next to in supermarket queues are theoretically unemployed, but living, I wouldn't say wonderful lives, not great lives, but they're certainly not starving. And then, of course, there are social grants. I'm not in favor of social grants. I'm in favor of people rather earning livings. But if they don't, they have social grants, most, not all. And so by and large, I'm not of the view that the country's broken. I'm of the view that the country is ill, and as you are.
Yes.
And looking quite well, despite the fact that you're not 100%. But you're not.
I'm a visual representation.
You look a lot better than you are.
I'm a visual representation, perhaps, of societal ills. If the indices and the measurements are tracking upwards, why is our ruling party taking such flack?
Yes, it's actually strange. I've never known a ruling party, a government, to be like ours. It's kind of weird. It carries on and on and on about how terrible things are and there's not enough transformation and whites have all the wealth and all the land and blacks are worse off, which is all just nonsense. And why they do it, I don't know. They're kind of their own worst enemy. And what they would do if I were their PR agency, I would immediately fall the ruling party for the ANC or the previously ruling party. I would have a whole propaganda campaign about how the things that are good and getting better. And they're just bad at that. And what they do is they say to people, we've been in power for 30 years. We've completely messed up. Please vote for us. We'll get it right next time. Now, after a while, you just no longer believe that. But interestingly, they say that everything is a mess under them. Now, this is very weird. It's not so.
They
so I don't know
talk
why
themselves
they do that.
into it.
Yes. And I think there's a racial issue here. In other words, black people want an excuse to take more from white people, so they have to create a narrative that white people are all wealthy and successful and unjustly so, whereas, of course, it's not the case. Some farmer farms and bought the farm with a mortgage like everyone else and farms successfully is a perfectly just landowner and employer. And so there's this racial thing where white people want to say whites are better and superior, so they buy into this narrative that everything's fine for whites and blacks are just useless, black people. And black people say it because they want to justify taking more from white people, which is a strange insult to black people. Now, when I say that, please bear in mind, if you travel around the country, as I do, and you go to Winterveld or you go to Soshanguve or Bushbuck Ridge or whatever, Pongola, you see this incredible prosperity of black people, unbelievable. Thousands in Bushbuck Ridge, for example, which used to be mud huts and goats and chickens and poverty 30 years ago. You go there now, there are thousands upon thousands of beautiful middle-class houses, shopping centers, filling stations, hotels. The place is just booming. Now, what's interesting is that why are people not acknowledging this accomplishment? Why are people not saying, wow, this is well done. Look how well people are doing. And of course, if you're in politics, you don't want to admit that because you want the power to take and redistribute and buy votes. So you want to pretend that they're worse off than they are. And if you're a right-wing white racist, you want to pretend that black people are worse off than they are because you want to say that whites are superior. So there's a strange, unholy alliance between black people and white people, left and right-wing people, all saying that blacks are badly off when they aren't. They're doing very well, and they should be acknowledged and respected and complimented on that. And anyone who travels into predominantly black areas like Bushbuck Ridge, which is the biggest residential area in South Africa, by the way, it's essentially from the Kruger Park to the escarpment for about 80K and north-south about 120K. It's a massive, massive area, and there everyone is booming. But if you look at the national accounts, this is not acknowledged. The national accounts say that our per capita income has fallen, yet the national, what we do know is supermarkets, for example, have growth of 5 to 10% per annum. Well, who's buying from them? And which is right. You can't have the GDP supposedly contracting and the retail sector and, diesel sales and building material sales and everything booming and rising, and then say the economy is contracting and stagnating. Now, if there are economists or econometricians listening or watching, they will know that there are all sorts of anomalies that arise in national accounting that explain this, and we can go into it, but I think most of your listeners and viewers will find that boring.
It seems as if every politician and political party in South Africa's message is the same. The country is broken, I'm the person, or we are the party to fix it, and it's become the mantra. Are the media complicit in delivering this message to South Africans? Because the media are a mouthpiece.
Yes, everyone is into this message. The only people who should not have the message are, of course, the ANC, but they've also bought into it for the reasons I've explained. So complicit implies some kind of level of guilt. The fact is people think it's true. In other words, you go to a drink with your mate, the dinner party, go to the movies, whatever, and you will hear the same story, the same negative pitch about South Africa. And if you say, but what about the fact that people are buying more clothes than ever before, that people are buying more groceries than ever before, that people... You go to any supermarket, any store like Midrand, the Midrand
Mall of Africa or so, yeah.
Or Mall of Africa, the mall, yeah. So you go there, and what do you see? A completely demographic South Africa. You see roughly 80% or 70, 85% black people, wealthy in the expensive restaurants, buying in the Gucci stores. You see about the appropriate demographic ratio of Indian, colored, white. And you see that in pretty much every shopping center and shopping mall in the country. And then, of course, in the ones like Maponya Mall, it's pretty much 100% black.
Sure.
Angola Mall, it's 100% black. So all of these malls, everyone can see. It's what I call, Tom, research by looking.
Yes.
Look. So when somebody says to you, South Africa's a mess, as you say, all the political parties, all the media all say the same negative story, then I say, but look, just look around you. For example, traffic jams. Why are there traffic jams? Because people have got money to go to work and travel and recreation.
Way more cars on the roads, yeah.
Cars on the road, yes. And so shopping malls are busy. Retail sales are going up. Imports, So the point is research by looking. Just look. Is what you see around you the same as what you're hearing? Do the two coincide? And the answer is no. What you see is the country doing fairly well. What you hear is the country is in ruins. And which one do you believe? Your eyes looking at the world or your eyes reading the print?
Well, from where I'm sitting in Weltevreden Park, I remember visiting this area as a kid. My aunt lived on a cottage on a farm in this area. There were no houses here. It was not suburbia. And now there are tens of thousands of houses. You could take an example like Midrand, which was just bare veld 20, 30 years ago. And now it's a metropolis. I want to talk about racial dynamics a little later, but you mentioned the farmer that went and bought the farm with the bank loan, and it leads me to land reform questions. Do you think there's a need for land reform in South Africa?
There's a very big need, but it's not the one that most people mean by the term. The analogy I use is, say two kids are adopted by the same family, and one of the kids is they're both boys, and one is black and one is white. We won't talk about the race or color or living standards or anything of the family. They're both adopted. They're brought up in the same home, go to the same school, same age, same everything. And as they reach adult life, they both buy farms, neighboring farms next to each other. And then people come along like Julius Malema and say, oh, we must expropriate the white guy's farm. Why? Why the white guy and not the black guy? Why just because this kid, they bought the farm, they paid for it, same way, through a mortgage, etc., etc. Identical circumstances. The only difference is skin color. Now, there is no logic, no justice, no reason why you should differentiate on the skin color of those two kids. And that's what people for so-called land reform want to do. They want to say, no, the white kid's farm must be taken, but not the black kid's. Well, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's completely and obviously the crudest and most ghastly despicable form of racism.
What does make sense?
What does make sense is the following, that black South Africans under apartheid occupy more land. Now listen to that phrase, more land. What does that mean? Than white people or coloureds or Indians? And the answer is by number. The number of properties held now by black South Africans is about 4 times that as the number of properties held by white South Africans, and then the coloureds and Indians in between. Now, they don't own that land, though. They live under Verwoerdian land tenure, where black people live on government land. Now, the land reform that's needed is every one of those people must be given free of charge a full, freely tradable title deed without any RDP house restrictions on resale and trade. And we can have 4 times more black landowners than white landowners right away, immediately, by just giving them title deeds. That's the land reform needed. The other one is land reform takes place through the market. The majority of people buying land, mortgages, and purchasing land in suburbs, as we call them, historically white areas, are black people. Now, nobody knows quite what the ratio is now, but it's probably something like 40, 50, 60% of the houses around where you live and where you are now are black people's land.
Yeah.
So there's land reform taking place spontaneously through the market. The government doesn't have to do anything. It just has to get out of the way and leave people alone to buy and sell and trade and mortgage and lease land. That's that one. Then farms. This idea that there's that farmers, white farmers, own all the land. I mean, people have this number like 80%, 70% or something, which is rubbish. It's a meaningless number, because if you measure by area, then it says that a piece of the Kalahari is worth the same as a piece of Sea Point. Well, that's obviously nonsense.
Yes.
So area is irrelevant. Value is relevant. Quantities of property are relevant. And what we have in South Africa is land reform is taking place automatically on a very impressive scale, according to all the banks. And if you go into any bank and look at the people sitting waiting for mortgage applications, you will see, again, I call it research by looking.
Yes.
Look, and you can see, and look around you where you live, in the suburbs and so on and so forth. And look in, for example, the so-called townships, as we call them, or locations or settlements. And you will see there the quality of housing improving, the quality of cars, the shops, everything getting better. Now, if all of those RDP houses, which is about 4 million, all of the pre-94 apartheid houses, which is about another 4 million, all of the properties in the traditional areas, which is about another 4, we're talking about something like 12 million black land holders who are not black land owners. Now, if they all became owners, then this number that floats around, what percentage of the land is white and black, will be shown up as
changed
being
dramatically. Yeah.
It's nothing. It's silly. It's a stupid thing. Anyone who says that black people or white people own a certain percentage of the land, you see that phrase, the land, what does that mean? It's a meaningless concept. The only thing that means something is value, nature. Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it agricultural? Is it residential? Is it recreational, etc.? So it's the quantity of properties, the purpose of the properties, and the value of the properties. And that is land reform taking place automatically, thanks to the government not even knowing, because if it did know, it would probably find a way to sabotage it.
Something you introduced me to, Leon, on a trip to Marathon and Delport, an informal settlement on the East Rand a few years ago, in our chat in the car on the way there, was that there are very many people in South Africa that don't hold title deeds to their houses. Recipients of RDP houses or people who've lived in houses for decades don't have a title deed. And that is extremely disempowering. You know, how do you get a bond for a house that hasn't got a title deed? How do you apply for finance to extend your house without a title deed? And I'm surprised that in 2025 we're sitting in a situation like that.
Yes, it is completely bizarre. The ghost of Verwoerd walks around the ANC's Luthuli House and around the Houses of Parliament. And not many people see it, but the Verwoerd's ghost walks around with a big smile on his face, saying, if I knew that black people would implement my land policies against black people, I would have handed over power long ago. And so the point is, we sit now with Verwoerdian apartheid land policy applicable to black people more than a generation. Most of the people who are now relevant do not recall and never experienced apartheid, except they still do. They experience apartheid implemented by black people. Black people still do not allow black people to just be free landowners the way white people are, unless they're black people who move into historically white areas, the suburbs, London and Constantia and what have you.
Yeah.
So the point is that why we have this is absolutely bizarre, that we have apartheid land law applicable more than a generation after apartheid was supposed to have gone. And that is sick. It's perverse, actually. It's kind of bizarre.
Always astounds me.
What I call Malema, by the way, the EFF, its policy is all land should belong to the government. Well, that was Verwoerd's policy. Malema is a black Verwoerd. He wants for black people what Verwoerd wanted for black people. Now, if what you want for black people is that black people should be completely liberated, free to own and buy and trade land, then where we went, the Shantytown, the informal settlement of Marathon and Delport, or, for example, the West Bank of Alex, who can go there, it's nearer for many people. And if those people are simply allowed to own and trade their shack. Now, right now where I took you, Marathon and Delport, one of my favorite informal communities, right there, if one of those people living in a tin shack replaces the tin shack with a brick house, the council comes and bulldozes it down. In other words, it is a criminal offense to improve your own quality of life.
Crazy.
At your expense. That's how perverse the system is.
So once in a shack, always in a shack for many, many people.
Yeah, you're not going to be taken away. You're not going to be given a house. And you may not improve your own house. Now, how sick is that? I mean, how can politicians go to bed at night knowing that that is the law over which they are presiding? A law that says if you improve your own quality of life by improving your shack into a nice little fixed and permanent house that is warm and cozy, then we will come and bulldoze it down. Now that has got to be... I don't know how you get more perverse than that. Well, I suppose I could think of some examples worth mentioning.
Let's go to the comments and see what you've got to say. And comments and questions for LeonLouw, our special guest on the Top London show today. Carol Hall says, hello, Tom and everybody. Lovely to be with you all today. I'm liking this. It's quite an interesting topic. Hello, Leon. Helen's mentioning air pollution in South Africa. Margaret Guida says, I'm glad you feel the country isn't broken yet. I'll take your word for that. Whilst Claire Gray, watching on YouTube, says, how do you explain unemployed losing their homes and how come soup kitchens have such long queues, Leon?
Yes. Firstly, by saying that things are improving for most people in most places in most ways, that doesn't deny, and I certainly don't want to do that. And as you know very well, Tom, my actual daily work is with the very poorest of the poor.
That's right.
People at soup kitchens. Now, how do I explain them? I explain them because the country is not booming, but it's also not broken. And they are mercifully few. Now, you say long queues, but the point is what percentage of the population is in that queue? And the answer is very, very few. I would like those people, those very people in those queues, to be free to run their little cottage industries and their businesses and not have government inspectors and government laws. Let me put it to, sorry, I forgot the lady's name. My apology for that. That's not good
That's
manners.
okay. That was Claire.
Claire. Let's just put it this way, Claire. If you happen to live, say, near Sandton or northern Johannesburg, and you drive down the M1, the motorway 1, from Johannesburg to Pretoria, on the left-hand side you see Sandton, and on the right-hand side you see Alexandra Township. Now just consider this fact, that when you look into Sandton, everything you see there is lawful, everything. The business shops have licenses, the employees are all registered, people pay tax, they've all got building codes, everything is, there's a world of legality in looking to the left and increasingly mixed race. Looking to the right into Sandton, everything there is unlawful. Nobody has a building plan, nobody has an employment registration, nobody is registered for tax. People running backyard mechanics, fixing cars, don't have licenses, they're not qualified engineers.
Two South Africas.
Yeah, so there are two South Africas. The black South Africa is criminalized. Everything they do is a criminal offense in Alex. Everything, virtually. Everything that is done in Sandton is lawful. Now, what you want to do, why you have these problems, is because of that. So what you want to do is declare everything that happens in Alex to be lawful. Or if it's not lawful, then actually act against it, which of course they don't. So, for example, you have this law that says you may not smoke more than 10, within 10 meters of an exit or an entrance. In Alex, that is not possible. You cannot get that far from an entrance or an exit. So smokers are discriminated against in Alex. But in Sandton, you can. You just walk to the end of the garden or down the road or outside the building or something. So the point is that everything down to something as silly as smoking outdoors is criminal offense for the majority of South Africans, namely black people. The life of black people is criminalized, and it must be decriminalized. Black people must be liberated. That is, poor people must be as free as rich people. And at the moment, that is not the case. And that is the apartheid dinosaur that lives on into the new South Africa that explains what you're observing and anguished about, as am I, and that's why I work to fix it.
Let's talk about racial dynamics, Leon, and I bring my own experience in here. At the age of 16 years old, I was, the fashionable term is conscientized, where I realized that young black children my age weren't allowed to do some of the things I was allowed to do, or I wasn't allowed to associate with them. I wasn't allowed to have a brown-skinned girlfriend, for example, and we were never allowed to live in the same area. We come from this very... are we hurt? I mean, I don't know. Are we hurt people? Does that still exist? I'm trying to work out what your solution is for better racial dynamics and the overused term racial harmony in South Africa. And is it necessary? Do we all need to get along?
Yeah. Firstly, this takes me from my field of expertise, which is economic.
But the reason I pointed towards you, Leon, is because I've never met anyone that doesn't like LeonLouw from any corner of South Africa. So you seem to be able to get along with people from all persuasions, regardless of viewpoints. And I think I do think you're qualified to speak on it.
Yes, there's a book coming out on me shortly, and one of the street vendors, the lady representative of ACHIB, the African Chamber of Hawkers and Informal Businesses, Rumbi Kongara, wrote a fabulously moving pitch for me and said that LeonLouw is a black person under a white skin. And what she meant is that I'm non-racial. When I'm mixing with street vendors or I'm mixing with capitalist industrialists in, for example, where the so-called Stellenbosch mafia live, Kleine Zaltse in Stellenbosch, I might be there with the richest of the rich, and the next day I might be on the east bank of Alex with the poorest of the poor. And I just see people as they are.
Let me rephrase that question.
I never understood race, color, as relevant. It's, to me, skin color is like eye color or hair color or height, or, why is it relevant? I just don't get it. It doesn't resonate with me. So what do we do? I would have to say that just start treating everyone as a human being, and like we treat all dogs as dogs. We don't distinguish much between which breed of dog, or antelope, or no. But that's a bad analogy. I would say just if you look at what happens in Gaza with Palestinians and Israelis, or in Ukraine or whatever, this ability to loathe people who are different in some way, I just don't have it. And maybe I'm just lucky. I think it's the way I was brought up. I was brought up to respect everybody equally. But you do raise an interesting question. Are we injured? Are we damaged? Is the country damaged? I fear so. I fear that it's going to take a lot. It's going to be very difficult to get people to be healed from this racial mindset, this racism.
Is it economic prosperity?
It's like anti-Semitism. It's just weird.
Is it economic prosperity that irons out those problems we're talking about? I mean, as everybody becomes more economically prosperous, so the arguing stops.
Yes, economic prosperity is a good thing, but it's not going to solve the problem, as we know, because very wealthy countries, if they will have great tensions between communities, different cultures, races, even though the people might be better off. But prosperity is a good thing. If people are making money and their living standards are in fact rising, that is what we need. We need prosperity. We need the country's economy to grow. The only economies that grow in the world are the economies that become freer markets. All countries that move towards less free markets stagnate and contract. So if you take China, for example, supposedly still run by communists, but actually have the freest economies in the world in the so-called special economic zones, of which there are a few hundred. The famous Shanghai, for example, is Guangzhou, amongst the most prosperous places on earth ever in Earth's history. Now, in those parts of China, tensions between the different Chinese nationalities have vanished. Everybody is too busy working, making money, building a new house, extending their bedroom, whatever it might, buying a new car, going shopping, going on holiday. So prosperity certainly is a source of peace. And when the poor are getting richer, they no longer mind the rich being rich. On the contrary, I make the observation that the poor of the world know exactly where to go. They go to where the richest people are. Yes. If you want to go to where there are the most Rolls Royces, that is where you're going to have the best quality of life for poor people. And you don't want to go to where there are no rich people. So you want wealth and prosperity for the rich, and that is the best place in which to be poor.
How badly do you think we have underestimated the size and the potency of the South African economy?
Oh, I think it's big. And here I'm in agreement with G.G. Alcock, who's done a lot of work on this, what he calls cardinomics. And again, it's what I showed by looking. If as you travel around the country, as you move in and out of these areas where there is the worst poverty, mercifully getting smaller and smaller, then you find that there is, and fewer people, but then you find that there is a lot of good going on and a lot of prosperity going on. And I don't want to beat that drum too much, but it's very, very important to understand that and to say, in those areas, the people that are doing well, who come around and want to do your painting and your electricity and fix your car and this and do your tailoring on your clothes, whatever it is, people get on well with each other when they trade with each other. Yes. And they help each other. And trade is the great peacemaker. And the lack of trade, now how big is the economy really? Let me make this observation, that it's a very important point to make, is the economy is clearly bigger than the national accounts suggest. How is that possible? Because there are very sophisticated ways of econometrics to measure things like building material sales and diesel sales. So you can take some metrics. Take, for example, traffic. if there's more traffic and the national account says the economy is not bigger, then you have to say, well, what's happening? Did something else get smaller for there to be more traffic and to be substantially increased diesel sales, by the way, more so than petrol, which suggests that it's for business and economic activities, or anything else. If you say building material sales, retail trade sales, you go to Pick and Pay and ShopRite and Woolies and so on, and they are booming. Now, how is this possible? So it must be that the economy is somehow bigger than the macro national accounts are saying. That's probably because of the denial of the informal by the way, the informal sector is neither informal nor is it a sector. It's very formal and it covers all sectors. It's the unrecorded part of the economy is not captured in the national accounts.
Yeah.
That part of the economy is obviously much bigger than is generally recognized. That people are, the unrecorded part of the economy is good. And this is why people are importing and people are manufacturing and people are well dressed and people are well fed. And there are exceptions, as your caller said.
Yeah.
And those are ones we should anguish about and not forget. Don't turn a blind eye to the people who really are suffering. But at least be thankful that the number is declining dramatically. The degree to which they're suffering is declining. And there's one thing I want to say, Tom, that is a big part of my work, is what is the role of technology? Now, people don't grasp that technology has improved so spectacularly. So people have cell phones and they have cars and they have warm clothing and this and that and safe food and clean water and what have you. So thanks to technology, in other words, with the same amount of money, people can be a lot better off thanks to technology. You and I right now are using technology to do this program.
That's right.
We started this 10 years ago. Okay, so certainly didn't exist when we were kids, and certainly if you told my father and your father about it, they would have thought you'd gone bonkers.
Space age, yeah.
Yeah, now it's normal. And what's coming with AI, just think of this. In your pocket is all the information in the world, and you can ask. Tell you anything.
Leon, I remember I was working at Vodacom in 2007, 2008 when the iPhone came in, and that was truly the start of the smartphone revolution where pocket phone technology met the World Wide Web. And I remember activating the phone for the first time, and there were two thoughts I had. One was, this changes everything, like blanket, wholesale, this changes everything. But number two, now a kid who hasn't got access to huge amounts of money, whose parents didn't buy a set of encyclopedias because they couldn't afford it when that child was in an early development phase. Now that kid has access to the world's information as freely and as fairly as anyone else. Data costs aside, but I mean, we've kind of ironed that out ourselves as South Africans. We find ways to get free Wi-Fi and latch on and download and stuff like that. But I think of myself when I was a teenager living in Springs, and my parents, there were no broadcasting courses in South Africa. If I wanted to go on a broadcasting course, it would have to have been overseas. No ways my parents would have been able to pay that. Now I can go onto YouTube and watch as many YouTube videos on radio presenting or broadcasting for free. The amount of information out there is astounding, and you do with it what you wish. Let's move on to politics. Margaret Guider says, I'm so tired of these political parties up against each other and all going nowhere slowly. I know that you probably know every politician in this country, at least every prominent politician in this country. I don't think there's a politician who doesn't take your telephone call. So you've got a unique eye on the political situation that people like myself and the people who are commenting, we probably don't. We don't get to interact with these people. How would you describe the state of politics and political parties in South Africa?
Firstly, I'm very respectful and mindful of people who are extraordinarily good political analysts like Frans Cronje and many others, and from Lani Majosi and so on. And I see politics as kind of weird. I've been invited, by the way, as you say, most politicians doors or phones are open to me. I've been invited to run and stand for and join various political parties. You'd be surprised to know about some of them.
I'm guessing.
But yes, I have been invited to join and stand for and run for them. But my problem is that I'm not into wanting what politicians want. Now, there is a sense in which wanting political power, wanting to be a politician, is a kind of interesting psychology. It inherently means you think you know better than other people how to run their life, unless you're some kind of weird sort of free market libertarian politician, of which there are not many.
Yeah.
There have been some, obviously, historically, and are some now. So I would say that what we need to do is to make politics less and less relevant. And the way you make it less and less relevant is to have more and more freedom. If people are free to do as they wish with their lives and their trade, for example, there are now more active cell phones and SIM cards than the entire population. So basically everyone who wants one now has all the world's information in their pocket. They don't need to know how to type. They don't need to be literate. They can speak to it. They can ask it to do their calculations with shopping baskets in the supermarket, etc. So what we want is really to persuade politicians to improve their own future and their own support and the number of people who will vote for them by allowing the people to be more prosperous and free. And a politician doesn't cause prosperity. A politician allows prosperity. The natural order of human beings is to improve their quality of life. They do that automatically. I, for example, wrote an article that went into the Indian Sunday Times, its biggest newspaper at the time, which I called The Miracle of Poverty. I said, as I traveled around India, as it then was, it's now prospering and booming, but as it then was, very, very poor and stagnating, I said I couldn't understand why such hardworking, enterprising, intelligent, diligent people were so poor. And then I realized that the government has to do a lot of hard work to make people poor. Think about it. Everyone out there is trying to be better off. They're all trading and exchanging. If I said to you, Tom, please make everybody poor, what would you do? That will be a very difficult thing to do.
Tax the hell out of them.
Governments succeed at causing poverty. It's astonishing. Well, they're not very good at it because people, in fact, prosper even though the governments try very hard to prevent it by having licensing laws and high taxes and labor laws and minimum wage and everything under the sun. Anything to stop people becoming prosperous is what politicians tend to do. So I would say to politicians, if you really do care about your country, if you really do want people to support and vote for you, then as the great Nobel economist and philosopher Friedrich Hayek said, the government can do more for the people by doing less. If it just does less of what governments do, then the people will be better off. And the people will vote for them. They'll vote for you for doing less, not for doing more.
I can't believe our hour is almost up. Can you imagine? We've still got so many comments to get through. So I'm going to try and be brief on my side. Let me just run through some of them quickly. Such an interesting topic, says Una, but a person becomes scared of giving your point of view these days at the risk of being called a lunatic leftist or heaven knows what else. Very good points, Leon. Helen Mittwach says, but what you see, Leon, could also be debt. Just because people are buying doesn't mean it's their money. Could be credit cards.
No, not really. Just bearing in mind that banks are organizations that lend money from people who save to people who borrow. People who save are mostly poor, and people who borrow are mostly rich. In other words, they are what's called creditworthy. So banks and credit cards and so on pass money from the poor savers to the rich creditworthy people and borrowers. Now, why do they do that? And that's because the poor people want the interest. They want the benefit of having saved and being thrifty, and then want to improve the quality of next time. So, yes, you can't spend money on a credit card unless a bank, bearing in mind the bank is looking after someone else's money. People think banks have their own money. They don't. It's someone else's money. So what the bank is doing is saying, you can go shopping on a credit card if you are creditworthy. In other words, if we are satisfied, you will pay back, and you will pay back to the poor people who saved. That's the thing. And so credit cards do not create more money. They just transfer money from people who want to save to people who want to borrow, and the people who want to save make sure that the people who want to borrow are going to pay them back. Otherwise, they would never have lent in the first place. And they are the poor lending to the rich mostly, typically.
That answer is why I love your thinking, Leon. Margaret Guider says, you're a bigger optimist than I could ever be at this stage, Leon, but my glass is half full right now. What else have we got here? And a lot of comment. Terry van der Walt laughing at your comment that Julius Malema is the black Verwoerd. Do you talk to Julius Malema? Do you get along with him?
We have met, but I don't get along with him. I actually do intend to spend time with him because I do want to discuss this very issue with him. I want to discuss with him, as I have, for example, with Zuma and others in MK, do you really not want black people to be landowners? I want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with Julius Malema, and I might do that. And say to him, surely you want black people to be liberated from apartheid and not subjected to apartheid 30 years after it's supposedly gone. Surely you want black people to be allowed to own their own land. And I suspect that he will say yes. When they say they want land to be owned by the government, they're actually not thinking of preventing black people from owning land. They're thinking somehow that's a way of getting land to black people. Now, I would like to have a discussion with him and other EFF people.
Be a fascinating conversation, yeah.
I've had a conversation with many EFF people who basically say to me, actually, you're quite right, we do want black people. I'll tell you a joke. I hope he doesn't mind me. Dali and Pofu once, I was having a chat about actually the Marathon and Delport land, and he was then chairman of EFF. And we were talking about going to court and fighting a case for black people to have land title. And I said, but aren't you worried about your manifesto says that all land should belong to the state? And he and these others, they joked and they said, oh, no, don't worry about that. That's just propaganda. We want people to own their land. So I think it's true that probably MK and EFF do want black people to own land. They just haven't thought that through that clearly.
Well, I want to point you towards the NHI, talking about not thinking things through clearly. And a lot of people saying the NHI is just unsustainable. It's a pipe dream. It can't happen. And then yesterday I saw an interview on Biz News with Alec Hogg, a doctor called Dr. Reinder Nota, who has a company called the National Healthcare Group. They've come up with a brand new health insurance product for 200 Rand a month. $199 a month get you GP visits. Effectively what they're doing is they are replacing the clinics for those who can afford to pay 200 Rand a month and need to go to the doctor every now and then. But what is most interesting is that the backers are African Rainbow Minerals, Patrice Motsepe's company, the brother-in-law of our president. So, I mean, if Patrice Motsepe is putting his money into a commercial venture that kind of replaces a lot of our healthcare, these the first points of contact in our healthcare system. I'm kind of reading the room like you are, saying that all this talk about NHI, to me, surely they've got to know it can't work.
Yes. I've got to cut lots of corners here, and if people want to know more, we obviously can't cover it here. But if you give, firstly, we do have NHI. We have universal healthcare. Everyone in South Africa is now entitled to healthcare, as you well know, Tom.
Yes.
Maybe not good quality healthcare,
yes,
but nonetheless, in theory, there is healthcare available to all. That's point one. Point two is calling it national health insurance is a fib. It firstly, at best, would not provide anything we don't already have, which is universal healthcare. Mm. Secondly, it's not insurance. It's in fact, it bans insurance. Insurance is prohibited by NHI. You're not allowed to insure. Now, what you've just told us about is somebody who's actually doing it, and they're assuming that NHI will not be implemented, which is correct. And the reason we know it will not be implemented, if you provide national health care at the level of, for example, for private healthcare, it would cost something like 1 or 2 trillion, probably closer to 2 trillion Rand. In other words, the total annual budget Now, that's obviously nonsense. All you can have for healthcare is a percentage of the budget. Let's call it 15%. But if you have healthcare at the best quality in the world, and if you include in healthcare what private people think is healthcare, including alternative care, traditional care, faith-based care, all of these are all healthcare. And who is the Minister Motsoaledi to decide that they're not healthcare? Of course they're healthcare. So if they really do provide universal healthcare to everybody, what people in a democracy themselves consider healthcare, it would cost closer to 7 trillion rand. Now, that is the entire South African economy, the whole GDP. So obviously, NHI, so-called full implementation, cannot happen, will never happen, won't happen. And what is going to happen is maybe there will be real insurance. And what the government should do, frankly, is get rid of all the clinics and all the hospitals. To who? Don't privatize them. Give them to the existing employees. Let them become the owners, owner-operators. And what the government does then is it insures people. So we have real national health insurance. They pay private insurance premiums for everybody to have a private insurance cover, and they can choose where to go, private or government, and let that be freedom of choice. And that's the way to go. So what they are doing, Patrice Motsepe and African Rainbow, is what others are doing, and saying, well, this NHI as conceived, misconceived, ill-conceived by 3 or 4 people in the department, what I call the Department Against Health. And the Department Against Health should be just bypassed. And it will be. It will be. Everyone is going to rapidly realize they better look after themselves, because the Department Against Health is not going to look after them.
Would you stay with us for another 4 or 5 minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Have you got the time? Okay. I just want to address 1 or 2 questions. And one of the biggies is safety and security crime in South Africa. Margaret says, Leon, how do we deal with the massive amount of crime in this country, which appears to be linked to the economy?
Yes. Firstly, crime is not linked to the economy. Internationally, there's no particular correlation between crime rates and the GDP per capita. In other words, or how rich or poor people are. Crime rates seem to, unfortunately, impact countries according to how good they are at crime fighting, rather than how rich or poor they are. But what to do in South Africa is we do have a federation. People forget that. Our constitution is a federal constitution, and policing should be decentralized. It is in theory, but in reality, we just have one single one-size-fits-all police force, which is supposed to run the same police service in Hillbrow as it does in the Tugela Basin, which is crazy. What you need is to decentralize policing to local communities, so it's community-sensitive, community-based, community-relevant, and to people who interact with policing. And policing must be tailor-made to the situation concerned. And there must be lots of public participation in policing. We need to get rid of this mindset of the police service. No, there shouldn't be such a single entity. There should be devolved, local, relevant, community-sensitive, community participatory policing. For example, I have been a police reservist, and you can have lots of. All we did was combating crime, common crime, protecting, especially over weekends. So what you want to do is you want to have policing community-based, relevant to the community, working with the community, the way the famous British police used to be. You know, the Bobby on the beat.
Yeah.
The Bobby on, you want the Bobby on the beat in South Africa. Maybe initially you'll need 2 or 3 on the beat together, but that's okay. So get rid of this notion of some kind of omnipotent, omniscient, centralized, one-size-fits-all police force, and devolve and decentralize and unbundle the policing to local community police services, genuine services with public participation. And, you know, for example, have volunteer police. It's a very good thing to do, or part-time police, you know.
To your point, Leon, Heather Knickelbein is in the Eastern Cape. She says they suffer in big time with the poorest province in the country. Water is a big problem in our areas, many a time without water. It's a sad situation in the Eastern Cape.
Yes, as it is where I am right now in Bedford View, where there's almost never any water and there's often no electricity. And yes, again, water is one of those things. You know, people talk about the water shortage. I want to point out that for 1 billion years, there's been the same quantity of water, no more, no less. Water is never consumed, never used. Water stays the same. The issue is, where is the water? That's the question.
Yeah, and where does it go? Yeah.
Where does it doesn't go anywhere. It hangs around. And what has to be done is it has to be used efficiently. Now, how do you do that again? And again, you want to have local communities in charge of their water supply. Now, we do have that. Municipalities are meant to run water. But if you take where I am now, we have the Rand Water Board, which serves most of eastern, southern Johannesburg, Bedford View, Kuruleni, and it's what I call the Rand Slaughter Board, not the Rand Water Board. But so what you want is a system of, firstly, the most, you know, how do we all have groceries? How do we all have clothes? How do we all have phones? Well, the answer is they're not provided by the government. You see, if something is provided by the government, you expect it to be inefficient. You expect it to be corrupt. Everyone does. Whether you're a socialist, a communist, a capitalist, you expect the government to be inefficient and corrupt. So what you want to do is say, how do you change that? Well, what you want to do is to outsource, preferably to small local businesses, local plumbers, you know, doing a particular suburb, being in charge. Again, bring the job down to the community where people involved are doing it, people can report easily, and where it's not this giant monster somewhere, sort of old apartheid dinosaur running some water NGO somewhere. You want the communities to be involved. You want to bring markets to bear. In other words, if people must pay a price for being wrong, politicians and officials pay no price for being wrong. In the East Cape where you are, they pay no price for failed water supply. They should
get an increase.
And if they were contracted and the water supply failed, they would suffer. They must suffer for not delivering your water. And we need a system that does that. That's not politics. That's not a government. You need to say, what rules of the game provide the right incentive to be efficient, to provide water, to see that it's fixed on time, that sort of thing. How do you bring about incentives that have that consequence? In other words, you want what economists call positive incentives as opposed to perverse or negative incentives. Unfortunately, at the moment, the incentives are negative. In other words, if you fail to deliver water, there's no consequence. You pay no price for failure. And if you pay no price for failure, you should predict failure.
Which brings me to my penultimate question, and it relates to what you're talking about. I want to bring corruption into this. I call it stealing. What do you make of the Madlanga Commission and the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee on organized gangs, syndicates getting their hands on organs of state?
Yeah, what do I make of it? It's obviously failure, but I do want to, again, you know, maybe the viewers and listeners are going to be upset with me seeing too much of a silver lining. Whenever I see a dark cloud, I say, what's the silver lining? Now, one of the silver linings with corruption in South Africa is that it's spoken of and it's not suppressed and it's not kept under wraps. The people who are corrupt are obviously very bad at hiding it. And so the fact that it is open and debated and written about in the media and so on, that is a good thing. And I'm proud to live in a country in which corruption and abuse and theft is subject to, for example, this commission exposure. That's good. So that is the silver lining. The trouble that's going on and what they're investigating is, of course, the big, horrible, dark cloud. But at least be thankful that it is taking place. I mean, that's the silver lining. And I'm not a Pollyanna. Of course, I see all the bad stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I do at least say, thank goodness it hasn't been suppressed and kept under wraps, and it is becoming transparent and exposed. That's good. We should celebrate that.
I want to throw one more viewer question at you. It's from Uniguider. She says, if Discovery can fly a plane out of a building and I can barely keep up with the costs of a small hospital plan that can't survive without gap cover filling in, that says the medical aid companies are earning way too much money. So in a free market system, how do you make sure that big business doesn't price gouge, or big business doesn't collude, or big business doesn't rip profits out, obscene amounts of money out of the ordinary person?
Okay. Thanks for ending on a very easy question to answer. The answer is competition. Get rid of all the stupid licensing laws and restrictions. For example, allow complete freedom of insurance companies to sell insurance policies. Allow complete freedom for people to contract privately for outsourced medical care and clinics and so on. So the regulation of healthcare is the problem, and I do a lot of work on calling for the liberation of healthcare, the deregulation of healthcare, competition. The reason you might not like a particular buy at Woolies or Pick and Pay or Checkers or Spar or whatever it might be, or ShopRite, but what you do want is to know that they are subject to free, vigorous, open, unrestricted competition from other chains, from small corner cafes, from informal traders. The best way for you to get good groceries is competition amongst grocery suppliers. The same is true of healthcare.
Now, I did say I had one question left. Now, that wasn't my question, so my one's still in my pocket. What is your message to South Africans that are watching this show?
Well, I think the message has to be, firstly, take some time to pause and look at what's good. You know, don't wallow in the misery all the time. There's a lot that's good, and enjoy that fact. It's what I call research by looking. Secondly, ask the government to liberate us, to free us. Every country where governments do less, the people do more. People are better off. So my message to South Africans is stop asking the government to solve your problems. Stop expecting the government to provide housing and healthcare and education and policing and so on and so forth. And start asking the government to allow things rather than provide things. To get out of the way, stop the controls that are stifling, smothering. You know, for example, the building codes that make it, they're all, last point here, Tom, is the laws we have, the town planning laws, the building codes, the safety and health laws, et cetera, are all laws inherited from apartheid. They're apartheid dinosaurs. They were laws made for white people living in leafy suburbs. The majority of people are living in a world in which those laws are simply inappropriate, irrelevant, and never enforced. So create this lawful world where poor people, low-income people can build their own houses. Maybe, you know, I know that I'm going to get into a lot of trouble for saying roadworthies on cars, all these police roadblocks everywhere. What you want is you want to punish someone who causes an accident, not somebody because they have a loose panel on the side of the car or whatever. So you want to have the law that is relevant to the real world, real people living real time, and you want to punish wrongdoers. You want to punish people severely who cause harm to others, and you want to reward people who make things better for others, who provide them with better health care, better groceries, better education, better policing, whatever. You want them to benefit from that fact. And that's what we don't have. My message to South Africans, find a way of benefiting what's good and stop penalizing it.
And on that point, we say thank you, Leon, for joining us on the Tom London Show today. A lot of comments coming in. I couldn't get through to all of them, and there are people that want to engage and debate with you, and we simply don't have enough time. However, the good news is that you and I are planning a podcast that will go out weekly, I think, in the near future, where we'll have these kind of discussions and lots of room for people to engage with you and guests on the show.
My pleasure, absolutely, and thank you for the interest, and thank you for your support and involvement, and I wish you well health-wise. I know that you've been battling.
That's nothing that an injection in the bum can't fix it.
When you're at the bottom, remember that the upside potential is more than the downside risk.
My dad always says, even a kick in the arse is a step forward. Thank you, Leon.
Well, don't enter into a kicking competition if you have only one leg.
Not right now. Thank you, Leon. We wish you a great afternoon. Can't wait to have you back on the air in our own custom-made show with Tom and LeonLouw. That's going to be fantastic. Thank you, Leon. Lots of comments and lots of people saying, thank you, Leon. Very interesting show. Absolutely well said, Leon. Man, I wish we had more time with this man. Tom, we need a longer show with Leon. Very interesting discussion. Thank you both. Community-run towns is the way to go. We'll be reading your book when it comes out. Thanks for your knowledge, Leon. Lots of lovely comments coming through. And as I said, if you wanted to engage with Leon and you didn't on this show, there are going to be plenty more in the future where you'll get to agree or disagree and engage with LeonLouw. I wish you a good afternoon in Bedford View, and I hope you have a constant water supply. That's my wish for you.
Thank you. I'm expecting it to fall from the heavens.
Yeah, well, just vote for the right party and it will. Thank you, Leon. LeonLouw has been our guest on the Tom London Show this afternoon. I'd like to thank him for giving us his time. He's an incredibly busy man, and I'm really, really excited about the shows that will be coming up. You'll get the announcement soon with LeonLouw on Facebook and YouTube. Some people have pressed the like button, some have pressed the heart button, some have pressed the ha-ha button. Those are our friends. The ones who haven't pressed it, well, you're not good friends. You're just acquaintances. Press the button. And also, if you think that the ideas expressed on the show and the views that have been put forward by Leon are worth ventilating, that's a horrible word that, but I'm going to use it, then just share this post either on YouTube or Facebook. We value every like, comment, and share. Thank you for participating in the show today. On Thursday, a Springs boy joins us in the studio. We're going back to the East Strand at 3 p.m. on Thursday. I'm Tom London, and this show was brought to you by Suzuki Kai.